Hey everybody, Michael Snyder, Pacific Northwest Weather Watch. Today is June 2nd. Today we're going to take a look at this system out over the Pacific Ocean here, bringing southerly flow, which will eventually spawn thunderstorms, mainly across the Cascades and eastern portions of Washington, Oregon, on into Idaho today. And we're also going to do that again tomorrow, again for eastern Washington, Oregon, Idaho. And today there is a chance for a stray thunderstorm over the Puget Sound lowlands as well, but more likely over the foothills and the Cascades. So taking a look at the satellite imagery here, you can see we are getting some sun breaks today. That's helping to destabilize the atmosphere. And of course, as this flow moves over the Cascades, it's going to get a little bit additional trigger there, some additional lift as this flow moves over the mountains there. And we are watching for a flash flood watch for portions of the Okanagan Highlands all the way down through Wenatchee, especially for any burn scar areas. There's also a flood watch for portions of southeast Washington, northeast Oregon. Now, taking a look here, the Spokane National Weather Service calling for that flash flood watch for these areas. It extends all the way down Lake Chelan, Wenatchee, and there's hydraulic concerns across the Cascades as well, with some heavier showers moving through this afternoon. You can see the flood watches down here, and they do have a hazardous weather outlook for eastern Washington here too, with some of these storms really training over each other at times, so there could be some nuisance flooding elsewhere into the lowlands. Now looking here, the day one excessive rainfall outlook, this is pretty rare for Washington, Oregon to be in this outlook, especially as we go on in, getting on into summer now, late spring. This is usually a wintertime phenomenon here, but when we do get this easterly flow on the east side of the Washington, Oregon, this can happen, as you can see here. And this is going to continue on through day two as well for the Okanagan Highlands and portions of North Cascades, northeast Washington. So we'll watch for that. Taking that SeaTac yesterday, 71 degrees, and we're probably going to do at least that again today. A nice warm day coming up, so enjoy it around the region. We are seeing the high clouds move in now, so it's going to start to filter the sunshine, but we did get some sunshine this morning, some nice blue skies and some fog rolling around. This is day one today. You can see that thunderstorm threat does include the lowlands of Puget Sound down through western Oregon as well, the way Medford, Eugene, Portland, and of course eastern Washington. They did take that marginal risk for some severe weather out for portions of northeast Oregon, but these storms are still going to be pretty strong rolling through the area today. I wouldn't have been surprised had they just left it alone, but they did take that down. Here's day two. The threat kind of extends eastward, Cascades through eastern Washington, Oregon. You can see the severe threat into Montana, down in through New Mexico and Texas here as well. And as we go into the temperatures now coming up for today, the NAM's painting a pretty rosy picture across western Washington, Oregon, eastern Washington. Pretty warm day for the lowlands, looking up towards the mid-70s possible for Seattle as well as the Willamette Valley. And you can see right along the coast, it stays chilly with kind of an onshore flow there. And as we go through the day Friday, we cool down a little bit, but still getting back up into the 60s for Seattle, Portland, and a decently warm day for eastern portions also. As you can see, the thunderstorms cool things off as they move through eastern Washington tomorrow evening. So we're going to do this 2 days in a row for eastern portions here. This is what the radar may look like as we go through the day today. This is the NAM 3KM. You can see this eruption of thunderstorms across the Cascades. If you want a lightning show, it's not a bad day to head up towards Stevens or Snoqualmie Pass or up through some of the higher terrain of Oregon here, eastern Oregon. You can see these thunderstorms move through the area, and you really see some of these heavier showers moving through near Ephrata, up towards Omak, and across much of the Columbia Basin here. So there could be some nuisance flooding across the region here. As we go on in through Friday, you'll notice, again, strong thunderstorms potentially for North Washington into BC, the higher terrain here, and you'll see them move through northeast Washington as well. But the component turns a bit more southwesterly, so it's not going to be much of a threat to western Washington, Oregon tomorrow as it is today. And you can see we continue this precip and we see kind of an active pattern across the region here. Pretty good rainfalls. I know my lawn is nice and green from all this rain we've been having this spring. But now looking at the HER, let's compare this to the NAM and see what it shows this afternoon. Look at some of these stronger cells move across the Cascades. Or it could be quite a lightning show this afternoon and evening for the Cascades. And look at some of these get out over the foothills and close to the lowlands here. And you can see this on into eastern Washington too. And that's why there's these hydraulic concerns and flash flood watches. Look at this for Omak. There are some pretty good precipitation rates, and that looks like it lasts for a bit. So this could be some flooding concerns, especially areas that were burned this past summer. Now taking a look here at the HER 3KM, we're looking at 850 millibar heights, and you can see this easterly component to the winds as we go through the day today, and kind of southeasterly across the Puget Sound. And that's the chance, if you like thunderstorms in the Puget Sound, you need one of these to fire up over the higher terrain and kind of remain over the Puget Sound a bit. And you can see how that flow does stay southeasterly across the region here, and easterly out of in eastern Washington. As we go through the day today, you'll notice it goes a bit more southerly, so that's probably going to favor eastern portions as we go through the evening here. As you can see, the wind shift back to westerly eventually through eastern Washington later on tonight. And tomorrow, this flow is going to be pretty much onshore, so that'll keep western Washington, Oregon out of the thunderstorm threat, but that threat will still exist for portions, especially East Cascades on in through eastern portions of Washington, Oregon, Idaho, on into Montana. But you can see our southwesterly flow continues to bring precipitation as we go through into the early portions of the weekend here, and we'll take a look at the extended coming up here in a moment. This is the NAM3KM, kind of showing the same thing, that easterly component of the winds today through this afternoon before we get a wind shift as the thunderstorms move through the area today. It could even be some blowing dust in some of these areas since there is so much of it out there in eastern Washington and eastern Oregon. So heads up for that possible drop in visibility with the blowing dust. Now this is looking at total precipitation. This is the European model. You can see some of these good amounts moving across the region here. And as we go in through Friday morning, you can see the rain kind of piles up there across the Cascades. Even portions of western Washington get some pretty good precip totals here through Friday morning. And look at this 2-day total out here. I mean, you're looking at some totals up over 1.5 inches for some areas, especially the higher terrain. So that's why the flooding concerns do exist tomorrow and today and tomorrow. So taking a look here at the lightning, let's look at what the HRRR said. Actually, let's move this up into the 060, I know, which is complete. We'll check this out and look at this kind of develop over the Cascades here, especially favoring Oregon here on the European model. And you can see it kind of stays out of the lowlands for the most part, but it is close. There could be a stray thunderstorm. And then even later tonight, this might put on quite a show across the Puget Sound if the European is right here. That shows a pretty decent amount of lightning moving up the sound here this evening. So we'll have to watch that and see how that develops. But you can see this lightning threat exists for much of the Pacific Northwest today. Now rolling in through tomorrow, we'll do the same thing again and kind of pop that up during the afternoon. And again, and it favors portions east of the Cascades tomorrow and should leave western Washington, western Oregon out of this. But you do see there is a little bit of a chance. So we'll keep our eye on that. Now taking a look at things here, here's the wrap. This is Energy Helicity Index, something I use to try to pick out what kind of soundings we're dealing with here. But look at across the Cascades, there is some pretty good shear and some pretty good turning. So we could have even some organized storms up there in the Cascades. Good low-level moisture, decent shear, and you can see it even matches up with some analogs of a supercell out there. But I don't think we're going to see supercells in the Cascades, but we could see some near or just sub-severe storms with some heavy rainfall and some pretty good amounts of lightning across the Cascades of Oregon and Washington, Okanagan Highlands, and on through eastern Washington, Oregon today. So heads up there. Now looking at the extended a bit here, this is the European, the 06Z, and I wanted to kind of show you this trough just kind of hanging out as we go on in through the weekend. It just kind of plagues us there. Now let's back up and show last night's run on the 06. Let's go to the 0Z run. The 12Z is running currently. So you can see that trough plaguing the Pacific Northwest, and then we build a ridge on in through mid next week, and we'll try to see how long this ridge lasts. You know, we'll kind of watch this day to day before more troughing returns later on in through next week. It looks like a pretty powerful system in the extended of the European operational run here, so we'll have to watch out for that too as our active weather continues on in through mid-June here coming up. This is the Canadian model. This is last night's run. You see the troughing, good agreement. And as we move in through mid next week, we do show some of that ridging coming across the area here. And the Canadian kind of builds this ridge up a bit more. This would keep us much warmer versus the European and limit what kind of active weather we are getting. As you can see, this really strong ridge builds across Oregon on into next weekend. So we have huge model disagreement between the European and the Canadian. And we'll kind of break this down day by day to see which model is going to be the winner on this discrepancy coming up. And let's see what the GFS has to say about this. The 12Z should be in here as we move these. Again, these are at 500 millibars, 18,000 feet, just kind of a general trough and ridge position that we're looking at here. You can see the troughing hanging on through this weekend. As we go on in through mid next week, it does show that ridge, at least a transient one, but you can see the trough a bit closer here. Then it starts to build that ridge over Washington and Oregon, bringing much warmer weather. This would be kind of a heat wave scenario for portions even into California as we look at this. And you can see that ridge finally push off and the GFS extended as another trough moves through the region and kind of opens up over Canada and northern states here. But yeah, we'll have to see because the GFS seems to be a merger of the two. But really, Canadian and the GFS really agree on this ridge position here, especially as we go on in through later next week through the weekend. So we'll see if the European starts to kind of show that as we go on in through tomorrow's forecast. Now, checking this out, Portland, you can see we drop back down this troughing through the weekend, then kind of that ridge moves through. And again, the European was pretty chilly compared to the GFS and the Canadian. So let's just go ahead and do this and look at the GFS's temperatures here. Let's do the daily high lows. So you can see next weekend that ridge would bring some pretty warm temperatures, and if that ridge builds in that strongly, these are probably going to trend upwards on in through next weekend. So we have some huge model disagreement between the European and the GFS coming up here. So this will be interesting to watch to see which model wins out. As you can see, our troughing this weekend, it turns into some heat next weekend on the GFS and the Canadian. So interesting battle going on here. And let's take a look at this as well for the GFS. Look at Seattle warming up into the 70s under the GFS's ridge there after the troughing moves out early next week. And look at the GFS calling for 80 degrees today for Seattle. So we might be nice and toasty today. So enjoy that warm weather before we go back down to the cooling, and then we potentially warm up next weekend as a nice ridge may be building up here. We'll see if the European starts to agree with that, though. But yeah, so watch for these thunderstorms. They're going to pop over the Cascades. Great day to go up there and enjoy some storms. If you like lightning and some heavy rain, it might be your day to go up into the Cascades or eastern Washington. But watch out for those gusty winds. Blowing dust would be possible. I didn't see any mention of that in the forecast, but that would be something to watch out for. And of course, if you're in any burn scar areas in the higher terrain, anywhere really through Oregon, Washington, watch out for that heavy rain coming down. That can really cause some mudslides and some quite unusual flooding across those areas. So anyway, we'll look at this again tomorrow. We'll check out that extended, which is turning out to be quite an interesting battle. The European not showing that heat wave, and then the GFS and the Canadian kind of showing it. I've heard a little bit of chatter about it on Twitter and some of the forecasts, but we'll take a look at that again tomorrow. We'll have a better idea and start to see if models start to lean one way or the other and if there's any agreement to it. So hope you guys are having a good day. Leave some comments below. Let me know what you're seeing out there, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.